Well, welcome back. To introduce the topic of this video, I want you to imagine that there's a new movie you're dying to see. You went to great lengths to see this movie. You had to drive to the next town over. You had to take a day off work. The ticket was really expensive for some reason. And you're watching this movie, and halfway through the movie, it's horrible. You don't like it. You know the movie's not going to all of a sudden get good in the second half. Now at this point, what do? Do you leave and do something else, or do you stick with it and watch the rest of this horrible movie? Well, a lot of people would do that second option. They would rationalize it. They would say, well, I went through all this cost and this time expense to get to this movie, to see this movie. I've invested too much already. I've got to stick it out and watch the whole thing. Well, the rational thing to do is just to say, look, all that expense that I incurred in the past, it's a real expense that I incurred in both time and money, but it's gone. It's in the past. So rational decision making happens at the margin. So I'm only going to think about these marginal costs and benefits. And right now, it's not going to cost me or save me any more money to stay and watch the second half of this movie. So you know what? I'm just going to leave and forget about the money that I lost paying for this movie, and I'll go do something I want to do. I'll go for a nice walk or something like that. Now, this is what's called the sunk cost fallacy, and it comes up in a lot more situations than most people realize. So let's look at some examples from the TV show Pawn Stars of people who come into the pawn shop and they are clearly suffering from the sunk cost fallacy.
I'd like to offer you around $1,000 for them.
Selling them for $1,000, I lose money.
I'm looking around $300.
I can't take that. There's more into it than that.
Unfortunately, he didn't pony up the money that I was looking for, so we weren't able to make a deal today. I really need to make my money back on the investment.
So those were three excellent examples of the sunk cost fallacy. Think about that first person. They said, well, I can't sell it for that. I'd lose money. Well, that doesn't make any sense. You've already lost the money. You've already spent the money to get the item. That's in the past. Now we're trying to decide, should you sell it to this pawn shop for this amount of money or not? Whether you decide yes or no to sell it to the pawn shop, you've already incurred that cost in the past, so therefore it's irrelevant. You don't consider it. It did happen. You did actually spend that money. I'm not saying you didn't, but that has occurred either way, so it doesn't really come into play in your analysis of what's the best thing to do in this situation. Now, this principle that you shouldn't consider costs that have come up in the past, there's also kind of a flip side to that. It goes both ways. So those were some examples of people who were thinking about how much they paid for an item in the past, and they were letting that affect their judgment of whether or not to sell. But you can also do this if you get a really good deal for an item in the past. You can allow that to disproportionately affect whether or not you accept an offer in the other direction. It'll make you more likely to accept an offer. So here's some examples of that other side of the sunk cost fallacy.
All right. I'm settling on $7,500 because this was a gift and it's a complete profit for me.
I bought this book at a thrift store for 75 cents, and I just sold it for $1,100. So it's a very good day for me.
I ended up selling it for $50, and I feel fine about it because I got it for free, and it's an extra $50 in my pocket.
I'm settling on $1,500 because it is 10 times my money. I bought it for $150. That's a home run to me.
I'm thrilled to walk out of here today with $2,150. I purchased it at auction for $100, so I think I did pretty good today.
$100 is good because I only purchased it for $15, and now I'm going to be able to go out for a nice dinner this evening.
So again, these are people who are unjustifiably considering how much something cost in the past to make a judgment about whether or not to sell it in the present. And it doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. If you pay 75 cents for something or you get something for free and you bring it in to sell it and they offer you, let's say $1,000, it doesn't matter that you only paid 75 cents for it. You just need to think about, I've got this item. Doesn't matter how much you paid to acquire the item, but you've got an item and they're offering you $1,000 for that item. Is that a good deal or not? Could you take it to somebody else and get $1,300? Those are the kinds of things you need to be considering, not how much you paid for it in the past. Now I'm kind of going to be talking out of both sides of my mouth here because I just told you never think about that. That's the sunk cost fallacy. However, knowing that the sunk cost fallacy is very real in the minds of most people, it can be effective to use it to your advantage kind of against the other side. So here's a few examples of the pawn store employees doing something very well and kind of subtly reminding the other side of how much they spent on an item, which technically should be irrelevant, but as you'll see, it's very effective.
Can you do 3 1/4?
Let's face it, man, you bought it at a thrift store. 300 bucks.
You know what? 300 works great. Thank you.
15.
1,200 bucks.
13.
1,200 bucks. It's free, dude. It's free money. You found it in an attic.
1,200.
Okay, sweet.
How about 12?
I'll go 1,100 bucks and we'll go to that more.
1,100.
I'm sure it's a lot more than the $5 you paid for it at an estate sale, so.
That's true. All right, you got a deal.
Sweet.
Unfortunately, the sunk cost fallacy is not just limited to financial negotiations. It comes up in a lot of aspects in everyday life. Maybe you have had a boyfriend or a girlfriend that you just stuck with way past the point that you should have because you kind of figured, well, gosh, I've already invested a year in this person. I'd hate to just have that year be wasted. I'm going to stick with this person and see if maybe they'll turn around, and they never did. This comes a lot with gym memberships. Well, I've paid so much for this gym membership, I can't quit now. Or on the flip side, kind of a diet. Maybe you've been successful on a diet, and then all of a sudden you messed up for lunch. You ate some junk food for lunch, and you say, well, I've already messed up my diet today, so I might as well mess up for dinner as well. We've talked about movies, but the same principle would occur with video games, books, or a TV series. You start it, you know it's not going to end well, but you stick with it anyway because you've already invested so much time into it. Maybe a new outfit or a new pair of shoes. You think, gosh, well, I spent so much on this new outfit or these new shoes, even though now I realize I don't really like it. I got to keep wearing them because I invested so much money in them. We see this a lot with athletics as well. Studies have shown that, especially in basketball, if a team pays a lot of money for a new player, even if the player doesn't really pan out to be any good, they will still play the player instead of benching them for another player that's better, because in their minds, you know, they spent so much for that player, they might as well play him, even though statistically it would be better to play another player that they didn't pay so much for. You see this a lot with government programs and even Fortune 500 companies. This will come up. It will come up with employees. They hire a new employee. The employee is not doing good, but they're thinking, gosh, we went through the whole hiring process and interview process and training process. So let's just go ahead and stick with this employee when you should just fire them and get a better employee. And in Fortune 500 companies, it also comes up a lot with research and development costs and advertising expenses. Now, one of the reasons that the sunk cost fallacy is so powerful is that as humans, most of us are very risk averse. So a loss hurts us a lot more than a similar gain. If you lost $50, you're generally going to be more mad than you would be happy if you gained the equivalent $50. It's just kind of human nature. And also, as humans, we don't like to admit our failures. I certainly don't. And if you think about all these examples that we've gone over, quitting reading a book that you thought you would like, not wearing new shoes that you bought that you thought you would like, firing an employee that you thought was going to be a great employee. All of those actions, in a way, are kind of like admitting failure. Now, again, that notion of failure, that's also a sunk cost. That's in the past. That failure has already come and gone. So you shouldn't think about that. But as humans, it does kind of make us think like we're admitting failure. And for a lot of people, it's just easy to go on and finish reading that book, keep wearing those shoes, and keep that underperforming employee to not have to deal with the notion that you failed at something. So in conclusion, don't succumb to the sunk cost fallacy in your negotiations or in any decisions in your life. However, feel free to facilitate the sunk cost fallacy in your negotiations for the other side. That may work to your advantage. And as always, if you want to check out the other videos in this series, just look. They should be posted in the text box below. And as always, I'll check the comments to see if you have any constructive criticisms or questions, and I'll see you in the next video.